Dana Denha here, and this is Let's Watch with the Ann Arbor Film Festival. Every year, talented artists from all over the world aim to take part in our local film fest. Artists across all mediums utilize their skills to create films and performances to make their mark on this internationally renowned annual event. Joining me is Alvin Hill, a local artist creating multimedia live performances. Welcome to the show, Alvin.
Thank you very much. Appreciate you having me.
Yeah, thank you so much for being here and talking about your experience as an artist and with the film festival. So why don't we start first with your background as an artist, how you grew up, because you were telling me a little bit about it before the show.
Sure.
And you came from a family of artists.
Both of my parents were musicians. My mother owned a small music school and my dad helped her teach there. He was a principal in the Detroit school system, but he spent a lot of time doing performances with my mother before they got married, and they started me on violin and piano when I was 4 years old, and pretty much from that time on, art has been a very strong part of my life.
So do you remember as a 4-year-old, did you enjoy playing the violin and the piano? Or, I mean, because it is in your genes, but I don't know, how does that work? I mean, that seems tough at that age.
I think it was bittersweet. I had live-in piano teachers, so you can imagine what that might be like. But I think that being creative was something that I always loved, and it's probably the greatest gift that they ever gave me was music and that gift of creativity.
So as you got older, you kind of stuck with it. Did you try out other instruments? How did you grow as a musician?
There was a lot of dabbling that went on, some electronic instruments, some different genres. But towards the end of high school, actually I was a big club kid. And so I was always going out to clubs, and I loved the music that I found there in the clubs, and I also loved what those DJs were doing and how they were mixing different music together, creating one long song for the whole entire evening. And I think that was a turning point for me. And then during undergrad, I did a lot more with electronic instruments and starting to do a lot of music for dance. Friends of mine who were dancers knew that I was a DJ, and so they'd always come to me and say, "Hey, can you shorten this or can you lengthen that?" And I'm like, "Yeah, sure, I can do that, but I could write an original piece of music for you." And they were like, "Really? You can do that?" And sort of from that point, I got into writing a lot of music for dance. I still do a good deal of that. And it got me starting to look at combining music with other mediums.
And that's kind of where you're at today.
It is sort of where I'm at today, yeah.
So, well, let's stick with the music for a little bit. What musicians or genres seem to influence you currently when you're creating your music?
I can honestly say that there's not one genre. As I mentioned, I grew up studying classical music. But as I got older and towards the end of high school, I was a really big club kid. And so I was always going out to clubs. I loved to dance. And I loved what the DJs were doing out at these clubs and how they were mixing different types of music together, creating this one long soundtrack to the evening. And so I started DJing, and I was fortunate enough to be around and start DJing right at a time that there were these two incredible genres developing. Actually, three, if you think about it. Sort of hip hop, house, and techno were emerging around the same time. But growing up in Detroit, I was really connected to the Detroit scene. And really interested into the house music that was coming out of Chicago. The techno music that was coming out of Detroit, I was also fortunate enough to sort of connect to the three guys that started techno. Um, Kevin Saunderson, Derek May, and Juan Atkins. I worked for Derek May for some time. I worked for Kevin Saunderson for a while and with Carl Craig, and really was drawn into that music. This was actually at a time when I had taken some time away from school, and after working for Derek, I went back to school, where I was studying with some more academic, shall we say, electronic musicians like John Appleton and Christian Wolf. And so, you know, I was mixing things from my classical background with these electronic forms that I had become familiar with. But also, I think I was always interested in jazz as well. And so those are the things that probably have gone into the mixing pot.
And so now that this was like 90s-ish when you were kind of getting into the whole house electronic scene, how has your music evolved with time? Because I feel like sometimes myself, like I'm obviously not a musician, but like I feel like old where I'm like, I don't understand rap music today. Like I felt like I really liked hip hop before, but now like the newer stuff, I don't get it. And do you ever feel like that sort of, or do you just really kind of go with it and change with the times?
I think I have an incredible appetite for music. In early 2000, I owned a small record store, and it was probably the only thing that really satisfied my hunger for music, because I could just get it and get it and get it and get it.
Yeah.
But if anything, I'm sort of on to the next thing. It's like, well, what else is out there? You know, I'm familiar with this genre. I've seen it for a while. I've watched it grow. But what else is out there? So, not sure if that answers your question, but.
No, I think you're kind of the way you're saying, you're kind of always on the cutting edge of what's going to be happening next. You're ready for the change, the evolution of it.
Yeah. I like
So,
the new thing. And
yeah.
I like being around people younger than I am, because they're always hearing things that maybe I might miss.
Yeah. And just kind of keep you going with whatever. Because if you're creating new music, you want an audience for it too. You want people to enjoy the music that you're creating as well.
Absolutely.
So you actually use like digital artwork, right, with your music? You kind of create these performance pieces where you're doing like a digital sort of artwork with music combination?
Well, my current project, the Media Ensemble, it's a big experiment in a lot of ways. What I'm trying to do is do something very similar to what I did when I was a DJ. When I'm working with two turntables and a mixer, you're taking two songs and you're making them into one song, and you're creating, through improvisation, you're creating this evening length piece. So with the Media Ensemble, what I'm striving to do is take sound, light, and projection and mix them in the same way that I would do those two audio sources, but manipulate them in real time as one instrument, and be able to play with other musicians in an ensemble.
So this is the Media Ensemble that you're mentioning now. Is this an ongoing project? Because this was something that you did in the 2017 Film Festival too.
Correct. Yeah, but it is an ongoing project.
Why don't you talk about the how you got started with the Ann Arbor Film Festival with the Media Ensemble, and kind of explain exactly what it is and maybe some of the other genres, artists that you were working with to create it for the film festival, because it was a performance piece that you could see.
I've actually been working with the Media Ensemble in different forms for probably the last 4 or 5 years. But what we do is we take subject matter from current times and blend those into the performance. So that particular performance, we were dealing with subject matter from the most recent election, and that and social media, and how we sort of wear these masks when we're on social media, and which allow us to treat others or dehumanize others.
Yeah, I completely agree with that sentiment. So as you go on, because it's just going to keep going for now, while you're into the Media Ensemble, where do you see it going in the future?
I hope that other people will pick up on that. I mean, I'd love to see other media instrumentalists, for the lack of a better way to put it. Other people who are not just manipulating one piece of medium as they play, but manipulating multiple mediums as they play and interact with other musicians. I play with other acoustic musicians in the ensemble, and try to interact and react with them in much the way you might see a jazz ensemble.
And you mentioned to me before the show that your wife is actually, she's a jazz musician.
She plays.
Does she
in
help
the
you with any
ensemble.
of this? Or does she influence you in any way when you?
I think she's definitely been an influence.
Yeah.
You know, I didn't grow up as a jazz musician, but I've often thought that what I did as a DJ was very much akin to jazz musicians, because I see it as an improvisational art form. And so Ingrid has given me insight into that jazz world that I may not have had before.
Was this your first experience with the Ann Arbor Film Festival in 2017, or had you done anything with them in the past?
The year before, one of my installation pieces, I think of myself as a technology-based artist, which sort of wraps all of these things into one. But one of my installation pieces was in 2016. Yeah.
You want to tell us a little bit about that piece?
That's a piece that I call I See You. It's a piece where there's a television who watches and sees you while you watch it. It has some of its own content that plays, but it will watch you and mix you into what it plays, as well as interact with you and your movements.
And what was the sort of reaction to it? I saw it on your website, and there seemed to be a lot of kids. Like there was photos of kids interacting with it. Were you able to watch people interact with the television?
I was. Originally it was a piece that was commissioned by the Smithsonian as part of their Nam June-pak exhibit. And so, yeah, there were a lot of kids there that interact with the piece. And it was very fascinating to watch them. It's always interesting to watch people interact with your installation work, because you learn a lot. There are a lot of things that you never think of until you actually see people interact with the work.
Oh, definitely. I would actually think that would make you reevaluate some of your artwork too as you're moving on in the future, when you see the way people interact with it. Especially someone like you, your artwork is all-encompassing, where you're using, you're creating your music, you're doing lights, sound, projection, and dance too, right? Because you've had some pieces where you definitely are utilizing dance as well.
There have been a few pieces that I've actually danced in myself as well. But
so you have you taken courses to dance, or
I've just always loved dance, and like I said, I was a club kid, so I love to dance. But
so are you like rave dancing?
Well,
do you have your glow sticks?
No, I don't have my glow sticks.
Well, why don't we talk about some of the other pieces that are on your website that people can, first of all, what's your website? So if people want to check it out, they can go see some of your work.
It's alvinhill.com.
Okay. So we already talked about ICU and the Media Ensemble, but what about water?
That was a full-length dance piece that I did with a dancer who was also a graduate of U of M, named Thayer Jonuts. Uh, it was sort of examining issues around water safety. And that was a piece that included projection, lighting design, interactivity, and a piece that I did some movement in as well.
What made you want to talk about water safety? Was there something that happened?
It's interesting because this was before the whole
Pre-Flint.
Flint, yeah.
That's what I was kind of wondering.
But I think it's one of those issues that continues to bounce around in my head.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's so interesting that it hit so close to home recently. But you know, there are many places in the world where that's an ongoing thing.
Oh yeah.
Trying to remember back to what initially got us interested in that. But
Mm-hmm.
you know, I think it was just how much bottled water we use, you know, and sort of removing water from one place and taking it to another place. It's not the best thing for our environment. I think I'm very interested in environmental issues
Mm-hmm.
as a whole, and that was the one for the time, I think.
Did you think about after the Flint water crisis, maybe going back and re-examining doing something with water?
Actually, Thayer and I have talked about revisiting that piece. At the same time, there's so much attention on Flint right now.
Mm-hmm.
Not that it can't use more attention,
Mm-hmm.
but there are still a lot of other areas in the world that could use a similar attention.
Oh yeah. Well, let's talk about new growth. That's another one that you can kind of see images of and learn a little bit about on your website.
New Growth was actually another piece. Thayer was in that piece as well as another U of M grad, Amy Kova, beautiful dancer and choreographer, and the three of us had a small company together, and so New Growth was a piece that I did with the two of them. That we originally performed actually in the Keene Theater here on campus at U of M, and that one had less of a central theme, but had a lot of imagery around environment.
And then I'm assuming Take Root, you're thinking about the environment too in that.
That seems, like I said, environmental issues I think are a big thing for me. And Take Root was also with Thayer Jonuts, and something that we did with one of the companies at Oakland University.
So you've worked with you work at the University of Michigan, but that's kind of how you've gotten some of your talent and relationships with people in your artworks.
Yeah, yeah.
What do you have on the horizon? Anything?
The Media Ensemble is sort of my main project right now. As I mentioned, it's sort of an experiment, and I have this vision of how those three mediums can be combined to create one instrument and perform with other musicians, and I want to see that through, and use that as my primary vehicle to speak on issues that matter to me.
Do you see using the Ann Arbor Film Festival as a platform again in the future to get your message across?
I love the film festival, and anytime that they'd want me involved, I'd be there. I think it was the year before that I DJ'd at one of their events, so we have a strong connection, and I
So your
love
door's
being part
always
of it.
open to them.
Absolutely.
If you could just tell people why they should check out the film festival as a viewer, as an artist, in any facet.
I think, I think people hear film festival and they think, oh, it's just film. But there's so many different things that you can see at the film festival. All the different types of film, from documentary to more experimental, to feature, there's so many different types of films. But at the same time, there are artists like myself who are doing performances, there are installations, there are all these different types of moving art that can be seen. And I highly recommend it to anybody, young and old.
All right, well, thank you, Alvin, for being on the show, and best of luck in the future.
Thank you for having me.
For more on this and other CTN series online, visit a2gov.org/watchctn. I'm Dana Denhoff for Let's Watch with the Ann Arbor Film Festival.